Hello. Today we are going to look at paintings that represent Revelations chapter 20. The book of Revelations was written by John the Apostle when he was exiled to an island. He had visions from God of what was to come, and Revelations 20 depicts the future of Earth. Talking about today is The Last Judgment by Michelangelo. This is a fresco that was painted behind the high altar in the Sistine Chapel. This fresco was painted after Michelangelo painted the ceiling, so it took place between 1536 and 1541. This piece is representative of Revelations chapter 20, and he painted many figures into this painting. The most important figure in the painting is Christ, top center of the piece. He is surrounded by saints and angels. Mother Mary is clearly depicted on his left, and you can tell that because she is wearing blue and red robes. Christ is looking down, presumably judging the people below. On his left are the people condemned to hell, and on his right are the people that are going to heaven. Michelangelo depicts three passages from Revelations 20, which include the first ascension of the blessed, the final judgment based on the book of life, and the condemned being sent to hell via boat. This is very unique because oftentimes in Final Judgment paintings, the only passage from Revelations 20 that is depicted is the specific verses that talk about Christ judging all of the souls that are left on earth. So the fact that Michelangelo includes multiple passages from Revelations 20 is very unique of him. The next artist that we are looking at is William Blake. In 1808, William Blake painted the Vision of the Last Judgment. This is a pen and watercolor painting. There are multiple levels in this painting. At the top center, there is a throne with Jesus sitting in it. Surrounding Jesus are angels that have ascended to rule with him, presumably during the 1,000 years that Satan was in prison. In the middle of the paintings, there are bodies rising from the dead as well as ascending into heaven. These are the bodies that are judged during the final judgment. And in the bottom of the painting, it shows bodies that are in very contorted positions that are often indicative of suffering. So they are presumed to be the bodies that were condemned to hell. And you can see that they're surrounded by flames as well, which also represents hell. William Blake specifically depicted the final judgment passage, which is at the end of Revelations 20. He chose this passage because he viewed it as a vision that needed to be expressed through art. He did not believe that the passage was a fable or an allegory, but he saw it as an eternal vision for the future, and it expressed what was to come. His reasoning is often why the final judgment is the only passage from Revelations 20 that is expressed in artwork. There are themes in this passage, such as judgment and apocalyptic doom, that are easily expressed in paintings. And when these themes are expressed in paintings, they evoke many emotions in the viewer, which allow a deeper connection to the painting. The next artist that we are looking at is John Martin. John Martin painted a triptych, which is a piece of artwork that is done in 3 panels. All 3 paintings took 2 years to complete, which occurred between 1851 and 1853. The first of these 3 works is titled The Last Judgment, which shows Jesus surrounded by angels, and the angels appear to be raising the dead as Jesus sits in a throne. The bodies on the left appear to be going to heaven, whereas the bodies on the right appear to be going to hell. You can tell the difference between the 2 halves of the bottom portion of the painting because there is a light side and a darker side. On the left, the lighter side is indicative of heaven, and there is no divide between Jesus and this side. whereas on the right side is a darker half. And the bodies seem to be surrounded by flames. The second picture of the triptych is titled The Plains of Heaven. This is a landscape that shows a very luscious mountainous body of water. The painting depicts chapter 21, which describes the aftermath of the destruction that occurs in chapter 20. And then the last painting in the triptych is titled The Great Day of His Wrath. This painting shows chaos and destruction that is representative of Revelations chapter 6. John Martin uniquely depicts different chapters of Revelation in one series of paintings. In 1917, Eric Gall made a wooden print that is titled The Last Judgment. This is a very different Final Judgment painting than we have previously looked at. There is only two figures that are depicted in this painting. One figure is Jesus. Jesus is shown on a throne, and he has a crown of thorns on his head. And then the other person is just a black figure that could be representative of the entire population left on earth. Jesus has his hand outstretched towards the black figure of a person in a manner that is beckoning him to heaven. And this person has their head down, which shows that they feel that they are not worthy of coming to heaven, or that they are currently being judged. This is a very different piece because it is very simplistic. Piece allows you to see the theme of judgment that is prevalent in the final judgment passage of Revelations 20, which is different from the other paintings. The paintings that have been looked at today are representative of the final judgment, which is a passage of Revelations 20. Revelations 20 as a whole has two prominent themes, which are judgment and apocalyptic. The final judgment passage was primarily depicted in artwork throughout the ages because it expressed what was going to happen in the future. So even though there are three other major passages in Revelations 20, the final judgment showed the two prominent themes of the chapter as well as what was to come to the future. So I hope you all enjoyed this presentation.